And this is, of course, we've just gone into a full-blown lockdown again in Britain. But having moved around, I haven't been out a lot actually for the last week for various reasons. But when I have, it doesn't look like the lockdown of the spring. More and more people are just getting on with it. And this is the headline in the Daily Mail this week in Britain. What lockdown? Market in London is packed with little social distancing or a mask in sight as visitors help themselves to takeaway beer and Britons flout new rules in their thousands. Which is very, very good news. Because the only way we are going to break this fascism is to cease to cooperate with it. So people pictured queuing for beer outside street food restaurants, packing the market streets. The images come amid warnings that the country needed dramatic action to reduce COVID-19 transmission. What that means is to people absolutely and probably beyond the darkness level of Gretchen Whitmer, called Chris Whitty, the British or English chief medical officer, and Patrick Vallance, the chief scientific advisor. Dark people, and owned by Gates. And they came out before this lockdown was announced and blatantly, barefacedly announced computer model figures for deaths if the lockdown didn't happen. Just a repeat of last spring. Same people, same script. And they've had to pull back on it dramatically because they were lying to us. And that's what Whitty and Vallance do. They lie. And just like, and they lie for a reason, to get what they want, or rather what their masters want through them. So, people like Whitty and Vallance and Whitmer, all these people, they have to go to jail for the rest of their lives when we get control of this back. If humanity on a massive scale decides that it wants to take it back. Britain's flouted lockdown in hundreds of thousands, in the hundreds of thousands in London today, as the market was packed with visitors helping themselves to this, that, and the other. Well, they're not helping themselves; they bloody paid for it, of course. But this is a part of a kind of a gathering theme, whereby people from all kind of walks of life are starting to come out and challenge this. I just seen a video before I started this with some Italian police officers taking their helmets off in support of the protesters in Italy of the lockdown. So once you start breaking down the structure of the system, and law enforcement people start refusing to enforce the system, then things are starting to change. This is another story. I've got a series of good news stories coming up here. New South Wales police blow whistle on coronavirus deception. A letter written by a senior constable from the Coffs Clarence Highway Patrol in New South Wales and signed by colleagues has exposed the COVID-19 narrative for its deception and the harm it's causing to police and their relations with the public. The letter, dated October 26, is addressed to New South Wales Commissioner of Police Michael Fuller, and is one of the best rebuttals of the COVID narrative of fear and control written anywhere, noting false predictions of its severity, false and misleading statistics, flaws in testing, and serious questions about the virus itself. Oh, hallelujah. The letter makes the very strong point that in the same way they cannot use an inaccurate speed detection device on motorists, The same must be demanded of the RT-PCR test, and as such, police should not in any way mandate testing for COVID-19 or rely on the results. So this is really good news when it starts to come from this source. For police to raise this within their own ranks may be portrayed as controversial, but the action is consistent with common law enforcement, e.g. investigating, exposing and prosecuting a crime of deception carried out against the public. The letter signatories are urging fellow police officers across the country to write a similar letter to their respective police commissioners or to sign their form on a link that's given here. The open letter concerning the police enforcement of ongoing COVID-19 restrictions says, "We are writing to you to raise questions we have about the use of the police to enforce the ongoing restrictions placed upon our citizens relating to COVID-19, which has seriously eroded community trust with our great police force since the Attorney General declared a state of emergency for the novel coronavirus. Our governments have acted upon certain powers to impose restrictions on its citizens, using the police to enforce their rules. Due to the novel nature of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, most people concurred that certain restrictions should be followed until more was learned about the virus." And then he goes on about actually now, it turns out that the initial predictions were a load of crap, as some of us said in March. And now the world is now, moving ever quicker in that direction. So then we have this story. This is a court that has ruled that the California governor, another dark entity, Gavin Newsom, has abused his power, and what he has imposed is unconstitutional. California Assemblyman Kevin Kiley and James Gallagher sued to stop California Governor Gavin Newsom's one-man rule. As California Globe has reported over several months, they were in Sutter County Superior Court, arguing that Gavin Newsom has exceeded his emergency powers in issuing executive orders having nothing to do with the coronavirus pandemic crisis, in quotes. State Superior Court Judge Sarah Heckman tentatively ruled in favor of them in their abuse of power lawsuit against Newsom. In the ruling, Judge Heckman declared the governor's recent executive order unconstitutional. More importantly, Judge Heckman's tentative ruling places a permanent injunction against the governor, which prevents him from unilaterally making or changing state law moving forward. So that's another one that is moving in the right direction. We've also had the protests continuing. Here's a story from one in Leipzig. Massive crowd gathered in the center of the German city of Leipzig on Saturday to demand the lifting of restrictions introduced by the authorities to stem the rapid spread of coronavirus. I mean, the journalists who write this crap is unbelievable. 19,000 estimate. I've just looked at a picture of the crowd, and there was clearly well in excess of 19,000. So the protests are also continuing around Britain. This is then a story written by a journalist in the Daily Mail. We're not going to take it anymore. You can sleep with your wife, but you can't play tennis with her. You can shoot ducks, but you can't feed them. Boffins scare us with graphs, then change them. This is Witty and Valence, the liars extraordinaire, and they're just getting away with it. I mean, the public are starting to suss it more and more, but you can lie through your teeth like Valence and Whitty and Professor Neil Ferguson to get the first lockdown in place for an agenda that's nothing to do with health. And then they just do the same again and just repeat it. And this story relates to a lady, a care assistant, I think they call her, Shelley Tasker, who made a public statement in a town square that she was resigning from the National Health Service because of what was really going on. And she resigned in disgust from her job, yes, as a healthcare assistant at a hospital, and she wanted the world to know why. And she said she checked the so-called COVID numbers in her area, and they were absolutely tiny. And on that basis, the whole county has been locked down with the rest of the country. I mean, I'll tell you what is amazing, perhaps the most amazing thing in all this. It's that even despite the evidence being sprayed in all directions like, an out of control fire hose, enormous numbers of people still don't see it. Incredible. It's my contention that obviously the brain is not where consciousness comes from. The brain processes information. It processes information in the form of consciousness from the mind, which is a field of energy. It's not the brain. And it processes other forms of information that come its way. It's like the computer in front of me. It's programmed to process information. But what you can do with a computer is you can firewall it off so that it will only process certain information and won't process the rest. It simply will not put that information on the screen. And so to anyone at the computer, that information doesn't exist. And it's the same principle with the Chinese and the internet firewalls, where great chunks of the internet are not available in China because Chinese computers will not process that information. And it's my contention, and has been for some time, I am unanimous in this, that they have ways, psychological ways, of programming the brain in those people that are susceptible to it a lot, so that the brain, like the firewalled computer, simply will not process certain information. And people say things like, "Oh, I can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around that." Well, what would the computer say if it could speak about the information that it's firewalled from processing? It would say, "I can't get my head around that. I can't process it." And I think this is one explanation for why so many people, faced with the bloody obvious, cannot process that into a perception of the bloody obvious. It won't do it. So it doesn't matter. This is the point. It doesn't matter how much information you put before them. It doesn't matter how much evidence you put before them. It doesn't matter. You can pile it, to the sky. Won't make any difference, because it's not about the amount of evidence. It's the ability of the brain to process that evidence into a perception of what's actually going on. So this Richard Littlejohn article says about the nursing assistant. Her figures may be purely anecdotal. Well, she has worked on the inside, but her figures may be purely anecdotal, but she doesn't appear to be that far wide of the mark. No, she wasn't. Yesterday, the chief executive of the Royal Cornwall Hospitals Trust confirmed that in the country's main hospital, there are just 7 patients, she said 3, 7 patients suffering from coronavirus, 3 of them in intensive care. 7. And that 7 will be diagnosed with coronavirus from a test, not testing for the virus. Yet on the strength of that minuscule number of cases, the writer says, a county of 565,000 people is being shut down. Businesses are again closing their doors and many will never reopen. Cornwall, like the rest of the country, is braced for a jobs bloodbath, but of course that's the idea. Lockdown enthusiasts in London may dismiss Cornwall as a faraway county of which we know little, hardly representative of the nation as a whole. But even in London, infection rates were tumbling before the decision to plunge England back into suspended animation. The picture is much the same in many parts of the country. Several towns and cities in the North and Midlands recorded a significant fall in COVID cases. Positive tests with the test not testing for the virus, not cases, in the last week of October, suggesting that precautions already in place were working. Well, it's to do with the test mate. The infection rate has declined in 5 of the 7 English regions, yet the lockdown zealots got their way thanks to a fraudulent set of projections from the science. Well, that's because it's a script, mate.